Okay, well, let's go ahead. We'll get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's virtual CEO address. We really appreciate you making time to be here with us today. I'm Rob Dowdle. I'm the current president of the Utah Valley chapter of the BYU Management Society. And a couple of housekeeping items before we get to today's featured speaker. First off, please know that this meeting is being recorded. So if you're comfortable, go ahead and turn on your camera. I noticed Tyler just turned his camera off when I mentioned that, but if you're comfortable, turn your camera on, know that you'll be recorded. You can watch yourself again and see how handsome and beautiful you look today. During today's event, if you do have questions for our speaker, go ahead and post those in the chat box. And then at the end of today's meeting, we'll do our best to cover as many of those as we have time for. Now, also at the end of our meeting today, we'll give you a quick update on some of the upcoming events that we'll be having. So stay tuned on that. But quick reminder about the whole reason that we're here today. Again, our mission for the BYU Management Society is to be able to grow moral and ethical leadership around the globe. And we really aim to do that through providing opportunities for personal and professional development for our members. I know that you'll find a lot of value today in what our speaker has prepared, and we know that'll tie perfectly into the mission of the BYU Management Society. So at this point, we'll go ahead, we'll have an invocation offered by Chet Harmer, and then we'll have an introduction of today's featured speaker by Carol Walker.
Our Father in heaven, we are truly thankful to be able to participate in this meeting today. We all believe in the idea of moral and ethical leadership, of helping others and being good examples for others. As we listen to our speaker today, we ask for thy Spirit to be with us, to help us to better understand his background and his ideas, as well as understanding how to apply these concepts in our lives. We're thankful for all that we have, and we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Carol, you'll want to unmute yourself.
And while Carol is—
I forgot.
Yeah, while Carol is unmuting herself, could I just put in a quick plug? The BYU Management Society will be doing another webinar later this month for all of the BYU Management Society. The speaker will be Marilyn Gist. Marilyn Gist was one of my professors when I was a PhD student at the University of Washington. She's a wonderful African-American woman, really brilliant, incredibly caring. And she recently published a book on the power of leader humility. So I think it's May 21st. So if you get a chance, you'll really enjoy hearing from Professor Marilyn Gist. With that.
Thank you. Thanks, Brad. That's great. Jay and his wife, LeeAnn, have 4 children and 11 grandchildren, and they live in South Jordan. Jay was appointed as president and CEO of the South Valley Chamber in September of last year. Prior to that appointment, Jay had been with the Larry Miller Group of companies for 35 years and retired May 1st of 2020. Jay began his career with the Utah Jazz and later was named the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing for all the entities of Larry H. Miller Sales and Marketing for all entities of that division. He oversaw, and this makes me tired just seeing all his responsibilities, but I know Jay well enough now to know he can do it. He oversaw all aspects of advertising and marketing, event and game operations, ticket and suite sales, public and community relations, event creation, and sponsorships. His last appointment and assignment with the Larry H. Miller Group was Executive Vice President for Corporate Affairs and Miller Family Philanthropy for the Larry H. Miller Group of companies. Executive Director of the Larry H. and Gail Miller Family Foundation, and President of Larry H. Miller Charities. Francis serves on various boards, which include Chair for United Way of Salt Lake, past Chairman of the Board of EDC Utah, Chair for the Anti-Bullying Coalition, the Promise Partnership Regional Council, the National Advisory Council for the Woodbury School of Business at UVU, and the Ethics Council for the Wheatley Institute of BYU. Jay, welcome. Thank you so much. It's all yours.
Well, I wish my mom was here to listen to that. She is still alive, but thank you. You know, some of you were on as I was talking with Brad about being in Pittsburgh. We served a mission as mission president 2005 to 2008 in Pittsburgh. And when I received that call, our first interview was with Elder Ballard, and he said, now this isn't a call yet. He said, but do you think Larry would let you go away and come back? And I said, well, I suppose we could talk to him. And he said, I'll do that. And so I got a call from Larry the next day, and he said, I understand you and I need a PPI. And I said, oh, okay. But he worked it out so that he didn't want me to lose my tenure, and I appreciated that. So for those 3 years, as I served as a mission president, I was also consultant to Larry. Now, I haven't put that on my resume, but he wanted me to count those years as employed with the Larry Miller Group. And, you know, I got paid $200 to do that and kept my life insurance and my 401k open, but I was an employee. And so that's how I kept my tenure and was able to retire last May 1st for 35 years. In fact, I was with the Jazz when Larry bought the team in April of 2005. I had gone to work 1985. I'd gone to work for Sam Battistone, who was the owner who moved the Jazz from New Orleans to Utah. And so, in fact, there may be some fun facts. Dave Checketts and I started 2 months before he did, and we did some research to find out what we were coming up against. And Dan Jones did research for me every year after that. So from 1983 until 2005, he said he believed that the research he did for me with the Utah Jazz and Sports Entertainment Group was probably the best longitudinal data research he had ever done. And I really hadn't planned to talk about that, but I'll just insert there that my research saved Hot Rod Huntley's job more than one time. The fans loved Hot Rod because he called it the way they saw it. Management, and especially basketball management, hated it when he said, I can't believe they did that, you know. And but that's what everybody at home was saying as well. But I've got some thoughts that I have planned to share with you today, really kind of under the heading of lessons that I've learned. And some of this would, you know, be applicable. I've tweaked it a little bit. You know, this is something that I shared last week with a group of business students, but it still applies to us in those of us that are still working. I thought that I was going to retire, but the CEO of the South Valley Chamber resigned to go do real estate, and with his father-in-law, it was a great opportunity for him. And after we hung up from that call of him telling us that he was going to do that, two of the executive committee members called me and said, Jay, you really didn't want to retire, did you? And so they asked me if I would take it on. I've been on the board of the chamber for 12 years, and it was really my vision, as well as with a couple others, to really take the Sandy Chamber and make it regional. And that's where we're at and where we're headed. One of the things that I feel that we always have to do is when we talk to students, and I think that this works very well with what you guys do, as well as what Brad does in the Wheatley Institute. There's certificates and there's diplomas. but there's more than that. And I like making sure that they understand that you don't walk out of college with a certificate or, you know, your diploma and say, okay, world, you owe me a job. It's which too many do and think that, okay, and that they have a starting salary of X, but that they actually have to work, and they have to work hard. And, you know, work hard is different, you know, maybe in a business setting than it is if you're out, you know, digging footings to put in a basement of a house, or, you know, leveling an area to build a driveway, or the hod haulers that haul brick for the brick masons. But working hard is still important, and you have to put in the time, and you have to put in extra time, and sometimes that means sacrifice. And I learned that in the early days of the Jazz, because in 1983, we were playing in the Salt Palace, and probably most of you don't even know what that means. It wasn't just a convention center. There actually was an arena there, but there was nobody was coming. I mean, it was dismal. In fact, we came in from lunch one time, and with Frank Layden and the staff, and our staff was 13 people. And when I left the Jazz, the front office was probably close to between 95 and 100 people. So things have changed and evolved over the years. But we'd come back from lunch. This would have been about September of 1983. The phone was ringing. The receptionist had stepped away. Frank Layden reached over and grabbed the phone and said, you know, Utah Jazz. And somebody on the end of the line says, can you tell me what time the game starts tomorrow night? Frank said, what time can you come? Meaning, you know, they may double our attendance if they would show up. But he really did say that. But then he handed the phone to somebody else. But that's how dismal things were. And so as we started in, we were spending a lot of hours and early mornings and nights, especially on game days. We wouldn't get home till after 11. But you have to put in that work. And I learned that when we'd go on sale with tickets, back in the old days before we had internet, people would line up in front of the box office and line up out front of the Salt Palace, or even when we moved to the Delta Center, we'd go on sale at 7 in the morning so people could get their tickets and go to work. And from a management standpoint, it's something I try to teach. You have to be there. Yeah, I was the boss, you know, but I showed up with donuts and bagels for those who were working in the box office. And I would go out and meet people in line and talk to them. I didn't have to be there, but I think my staff appreciated the fact that Jay told us we have to be here at 7 in the morning, and it's nice to see that he got out of bed as well. One of the things I think, you know, we sacrifice, and in business, and I learned this from a man that I respected in business as well as in church. If you plan, the sacrifices don't have to take negative effects. Yes, I left at 7 in the morning and came home late in those early days of the Jazz, and even when we were successful. But and I held church callings, and that could take a toll on a family if you don't plan for it. And one of the ways we did that was, you know, LeeAnn would bring the kids to the Jazz game, which, you know, they thought that was great. But then we used to divide up and take turns riding home with Dad. And that was my opportunity to talk to them, to be able to find out what was going on in their life and with their friends and their school classes. And we were able to stay in touch. I included them in my job. Sometimes I had to go in on Saturdays. Sometimes I had to go down to the practice facility, and I would take them with me. And while I had to do some things, they could sit at my secretary's desk and play with her computer, or, you know, but they also got some benefits of meeting Carl Malone and John Stockton and Jeff Hornacek. Back in those days, that's when my kids were growing up. And, you know, they'll never forget, you know, having Carl Malone come to their school class and Thurl Bailey coming to dinner. But by involving them in the sacrifice, they didn't feel like they were missing out on things. A story of, you know, putting in hard work and willing to work and get where you're at. Jim Olson, who's the president of the Utah Jazz today, I hired a year after we opened the Delta Center. I had come up with 355 dunk, and as kind of the number you could call to buy tickets. And Dan Jones' research said that 355 dunk was the #1 recognized unaided phone number in Utah, with the exception at that time, Domino's had a phone number that was kind of one dial, and you could get pizza anywhere in the Wasatch Front, and you only had to call one number. But we really promoted that. Then I thought I needed a phone room during the day as well as at night. And so I needed a phone room manager, and Jim Olson was one of the applicants. Well, he had graduated from the University of Utah. He'd gone back to Boston and got his MBA. He was head and shoulders above all the other candidates. He was working for Fidelity. I didn't need that. I needed somebody to manage 6 to 10 part-time employees, make sure they were on the phone, make sure they had lists to call, that they had good demeanor when people answered. He was overqualified. And he kept calling me saying, "Mr. Francis, please." And I said, "Jim, if I hire you, I'm going to be doing you a disservice because you're way overqualified for this job." And finally, I just said, after like the 3rd or 4th call, I said, "Okay, we'll do this, but don't blame me if it interrupts your career." But just the opposite, because he got his fingernails dirty, really understood the ticketing system. He advanced to ticket manager, box office manager. We had an opening for ticket sales manager. And eventually he just took all those things on. And then when I had the chance to leave and go be a mission president, that gave him a chance to really propel. And today, he's the president of the Utah Jazz. And so it really is by, having to work. And he didn't use that piece of paper, that degree, that diploma to say, you owe me something. The business world owes me something. Another thing that I like to talk about is that got me where I'm at is things that I call hands-on. When I went to work in the ad agency business before I went to work for the Jazz, I knew nothing about artwork or producing TV spots or radio spots or putting together a brochure. And yet I was a partner in an ad agency. And so I would go to the topographers. That's old school stuff today. It's all done on your laptop, but I learned how they set type and how the artist put it together on a whiteboard, and how they burned a negative, and then they burned a plate, and then the plate went to the printers. And hands-on, I saw how the ink transferred. I went to the radio station in KSL and sat in the production booth to see how they did the commercials for my clients. And so I got hands-on, and I think that we can't ever do enough of that. This morning, here at the chamber, I had staff that was at an event. They had to be there. I didn't have to be there, but I wanted to go learn and see what we were doing and be with them. And it was an HR company teaching some of our small businesses some of the HR things that they need to do. So I just can't emphasize enough about being hands-on. And even when I was the executive vice president of the Utah Jazz, or the executive vice president of the Larry H. Miller Group in operations, you go out and you work with them and you'll find out more by doing that. And it's just a great leadership skill. One of the things that I would encourage everybody to do, one of the things that has been the biggest asset for me in business, is building relationships. When we were looking for someone to help fund a need with the Jazz before Larry, we were out talking to major businesses about limited partnerships. We needed to raise $2 million. We're trying to find 20 people at $100,000 each. And that's when we ran into Larry Miller, and Dave Checketts had met him first. And Larry went from potentially interested to buying half to buying all the team. But in those early days of the Jazz, I had to sell VIP seats. I had to start getting ready to sell packages. I needed to develop relationships. And so as I started to sell, the 100 Club was a new creation, something that had never been done before. And it had, this big upfront fee plus the tickets. But over time, I developed these relationships with people and kept those relationships. And it helped when we went to the Delta Center. Now all of a sudden I had 56 suites to sell that we'd never had before. And it was those relationships that they were the first partners in to be able to help us sell those suites. It was a relationship that I developed early on with Fred Rollins at Delta Airlines that helped us to get the first naming rights sponsorship for Delta, the Delta Center. And so today, when I came to the South Valley Chamber, I have rallied around my relationships and have got them to support us and to kind of help strengthen the Chamber's submissions and what we're trying to do. And the Chamber has never been in a better position today than it's ever been. And it's not because Jay is a great businessman. It's because I have great relationships and they support what we're doing. They believe what we're doing. I don't want them to fund Jay. I want them to fund the Chamber and support the Chamber. But the door was open because I had those relationships with Scott Anderson of Zions Bank or Fred Lampropoulos of Merit Medical. Another great relationship that many of you'll know is James Clark, and that's a relationship that I've developed in the last 7-8 years. That doesn't go back the 35 years. We always have to be building relationships, and a relationship is a two-way street. It's not just Jay always asking; it's being there when they need you, or seeing when they need you and stepping up, and so that you can be there. But it was those relationships that really helped in days when I needed to fill some seats. I came up with a plan. Let me just sidetrack there. When we moved from the Salt Palace to the Delta Center, we had almost 9,000 more seats to sell, but really about 7,500 after the pre-sales on a nightly basis. And you times that times 43 games. That's a lot of seats to sell that you haven't been selling. And so there were some nights when you could see you had 2,000 or 3,000 green seats were going to be available. And so I started working with entities that could put fannies in seats that wouldn't take away from sales opportunities. These are people. These would be groups or individuals who would no way ever be able to buy a seat or buy a ticket, but they would be able to come to a game. And so I was working with some schools and some groups that had access to groups, and occasionally, I would give them out a couple hundred tickets in different groups to be able to come to the game. Larry was very hands-on and didn't exactly understand organizational charts. And so he would call and talk to whoever he wanted to in his organizations. And he would often call my ticket manager and get reports instead of calling Jay and saying, will you give me a ticket report? So one day he had called her and he was asking her about comp tickets. And he was reviewing and we had been averaging about 2,000 complimentary tickets. Well, Larry instantly in his brain times 2,000 times the average ticket price times the number of games, and immediately he dialed me. And when he was he'd be a heater. That's an auto term that I learned, but he was hot, and he asked me what the heck I thought I was doing, giving his money away. And I, whoa, what are you talking about? And he said, I just got a ticket report. You're giving away 2,000 tickets a game. I said, not every game. He said, anyway. And I said, Larry, let me explain something. I said, we don't give those away on the Laker games or on the San Antonio games or on the Boston Celtics games. But I said, when were soft, I work with groups to be able to put people in seats, because Larry, I'm your best marketing guy. I'm the best guy that you'll ever have selling tickets. I had to build myself up for a minute in the conversation. And I said, but I'm not even good enough to sell a green seat, a Coke and a popcorn and a hot dog. But if I get somebody sitting there, I've got a chance. I think I've got a 50-50 chance of somebody buying a hot dog, Coke, or a popcorn. And I think that's better than an empty green seat. He hung up on me. And then he called back about 20 minutes later and he said, just be wise. And then he hung up on me again. So from that, I said, okay, I need to continue doing this, but I'm not sure I want to go through this aggravation all the time. So through those relationships, I went back to Dixon Paper and to Franklin Covey and to New Skin and Swire Coca-Cola, and developed a list of relationships I had and said, will you give me $5,000 to $10,000 that I can buy $2 tickets for kids and underprivileged parts of the population to come to jazz games when we're going to have poor attendance? And they all said, sure, yeah. In fact, we adopted a school. Will you use this school? And so instead of comping them, I was buying $2 tickets. And so Larry got the ticket report. He didn't see the 2,000 comps, but he also didn't see the $2 price. But he was happy. I was happy. And of course, we got to a point where we didn't have to do that anymore, and be able, because of, the team took credit for the full seats when they were winning. The marketing department got the blame when we didn't fill the arena when they were playing horrible. But that's professional sports. I just wanted to touch on one more thing. I think we're still good on time. Yeah. And that's something that I've learned in my last 7 to 9 years of working with Gail on philanthropy. I had the opportunity to manage all of her charitable giving, all of the family's foundation charitable giving, the companies, and then we had a employee giving campaign or arm, which was called Larry H. Miller Charities, and the employees could elect to have some money taken out of their paychecks. And let me just touch on that. We called it Give Us Five because it was kind of started back in the high five days that became really popular in sports. And Larry said, maybe we could ask all the employees if they want to give $5 out of their paycheck. And we called it Give Us Five. And here, probably 7 years ago, Gail asked me how was it going, and this was for all of our dealerships. And some of you may or may not be aware, but we have, I don't know, Carol, I think probably up to 64 dealerships. We're in 7 states, so it goes out through through everywhere where we have businesses. And she said, how's it going? And I said, well, it does pretty well. Here in Utah, we do really well. But I said, in Spokane, where we have 3 dealerships, it's a little bit slim pickings, or in at the time in Boise. And she said, well, it's more fun to give away more money. And I said, you're right. And she said, well, what would it cost me to match all of the employees giving? And so I ran some numbers for her, and I said, well, here's what it would cost to match all of the out-of-state employees. And she said, why just all the out-of-state? And I said, well, Utah is doing pretty well, and we get the benefit of what you do personally. So from a standpoint of working for an organization that does a lot. And she said, no, if I'm going to match Jim Brown's paycheck in Boise, then I'm going to match, Carol Walker's paycheck in Draper, Utah. And so she said, I'll do it. So the employees, she started matching personally, had nothing to do with the foundation. And then it was interesting, then the employee giving started to rise up because they knew that their $5 became $10, and there was more that was going to be able to be done in the markets where they lived. but I really learned a lot in working with Gail in philanthropy. And, you know, I wish I wish I could still be rubbing shoulders with her on that, because it was so fun to be able to watch her philosophy on giving. A lot of foundations will really detail it and grind the people who are at. We wanted to make sure we were giving to a worthy cause, and we wanted to have good reports, and we wanted to know what good was going to get done. But if it was for a good purpose, she didn't want to grind them, and if she felt good about it, you know, let's support them. And we had to set up some criteria, because, you know, there's even with Gail, there's only so much money. Today, I'd be like, you know, after the sale of the Jazz, I think that their giving bucket filled up really fast, and I'm sure that Utah's going to be an extra winner, because Gail's going to be doing a lot more giving in Utah and supporting. But, you know, there was a speech given, I believe it was, I don't remember the year, but it was given by Arthur Brooks, and it was given at BYU. And I believe it was called Giving Matters. It's a wonderful talk if you haven't read it. But part of it, he talks about, you know, a quote. He read a quote from Rockefeller that said, "I am rich because I give." And Arthur Brooks came from, you know, his background was an economist. And he says, that doesn't make any sense. He said, 4 minus 1 is not 5, it's 3. And so he said, this doesn't make sense. And yet he heard it from a couple. And so he decided to make a project out of it. And he researched the Rockefellers, he researched other wealthy entrepreneurs and business people. And his conclusion of his research was, they're right. And he doesn't explain it. He can't explain it. He says, but there's something there, that when we give back and when we give from what we've earned or what we create, something happens. You know, those of us here, we might have a better explanation than someone outside of the church. But he even said, I don't know how to explain it, but it's a real fact. I hosted him, and he came to Salt Lake and spoke for the Sandy Chamber a number of years ago when I was chairman, and he gave that same portion of his speech. And he even talked to he said, I remember talking to my father, and they're not LDS. And he said, I asked my dad, why do you give 10% of your gross to our pastor? He said, because it's a commandment. Well, why don't you give 10% of your net? And he said, because I want to be on the top line, not with the Lord, not the bottom line. So it was interesting that you know, he learned that as a young man from his father, from, you know, giving back to the church. He learned it as he did the research of those who are wealthy. When I came back from my mission, Larry was in his hospital bed, and he had just been diagnosed with the complications of diabetes and his heart attack, and it was going to be a long road. Didn't know at that time that 9 months later he was going to pass away, but that was the first time we had seen each other face to face for 3 years, and he had that heart attack and was in the hospital 2 weeks before I got home, and that was our first meeting. And we visited, we caught up, and as I was getting ready to leave, he said to me, Jay, he said, let me share something with you that I've shared with the family last night in our family meeting. He said, it's something that I want to rally around in the company. And that's when, and you've all heard it, but he said, go about doing good till there's too much good in the world. And he said, what do you think? And I said, wow. I said, that's what it's all about. He said, I need your help making sure that the company rallies around that, and that the family, that becomes the family moniker. And I said, okay, well, I didn't know that what my job would be, but you know, 7 years after Larry passed, I'd be asked to oversee the giving and the philanthropy for Gail personally, as well as the company. And that's kind of every time we would review buy-sell sheets of a new dealership or a business, Gail would always ask, how much more money can I give away? And that was her intent in life. And I'm sure, and I would, well, it may come up in a question about the sale of the Jazz, and I'll give you my opinion, because that happened after I retired, but I'll give you my opinion. But I think that if somebody it feels like maybe they're lacking a little bit in success and they want to do a little bit more, they probably ought to look at how are you giving back to the community? Are you giving back? And it doesn't have to always be in the form of cash or checks. It might be in actually taking your employees or going with your company and giving back to the community, painting some fences, raking a park. But giving back is absolutely paramount to be able to, I think, be a solid contributor to the community, to bolster those relationships that I talked about a few minutes ago, and to be able to continue to grow your business. I'm grateful that I learned that. I try to teach that to my kids with the little bit that we have, bring them together and do some things together in giving back to the community. But I think those who are successful have learned that they have to give back in order to. Gail believes, and then I'll close and we take some questions. 2008, 2009 times were tough, and car sales went down, and we had to let F&I directors go because when you're not selling cars, you don't need 4, you only need 1. The Jazz had gotten fat in their staff, and K-Jazz and the arena. And Gail went to Greg and she said, I know we have to do some trimming. And she said, this breaks my heart. She said, but you have to find, and she gave him a number, this much money that I can still continue to give to the community and to support the needs of the community on an annual basis. And she continued to give. That really came out of her profits, out of what was hers. And she believes that because she continued to give instead of save or put away, that the Larry Miller grew in exponential ways. From 2009 to 2011, we bought more dealerships. We bought almost as many dealerships as we owned in 2008. We were in a cash position to be able to do it. There were others that were in trouble, and it just made us a stronger company. And she believes it's those opportunities and were able to come to us and afforded us because she continued to give to the community and to share what she had. So thank you. That's a lot of talking, and this would be my first Zoom speech. I've spent my life on Zoom, but the last year, but I'm not ever sure. I am sure I've never given a talk on Zoom except for a 30-minute church lesson. So thank you. I don't know if there's some questions.
Yeah, Jay, we have a lot of questions, so we'll get started. And thank you. You've done a great job doing your first Zoom speech, and thank you for your insights. So let's hit our first question with your opinion on why the Miller family sold the Utah Jazz.
I wish I was inside. I did not have any heads up. I got 20 minutes notice before anybody else. And talk about a well-kept secret. Holy cow. I don't know how they did that, but here's my take on it as I've talked to Gail afterwards. One is that they felt comfortable with Ryan Smith, that he would be an owner that would keep it here in Utah, that would continue to build it on a good foundation, that he had the financial wherewith to be able to invest in the team and to keep the team on a winning trajectory. And we've seen that, right? I mean, he's been willing to help pay players, if you will, to come and to stay. Secondly, it gave her an opportunity to use an asset. I mean, she had a $1.5 billion asset sitting on her, well, she had put it in a trust, and this would be the only way it could have ever been moved out of that trust was while she's alive. After she had passed, it would have been locked up in that trust. And she did that because she didn't want her posterity to think, wow, we can get rich if we sell the Jazz, and Mom's gone. So, and everybody got nervous when Larry passed away. But so she felt comfortable with Ryan. Now she's got money that she can give back to the community, and they can diversify the company. And because the breath was taken out of me when I heard it 20 minutes before the press conference. But as I thought about it, as I visited with her, this is a win-win-win. It's a win for Utah. It's a win for the Jazz, and the community is going to be better for it because of that $1.6 billion after tax. That Utah's going to see a lot of that. Now, I'm going to share a little inside secret that because their CFO is a good friend of mine, and we were working. Gail bought us out of an investment that some of us had with her in one of the companies, and he and I were talking about, well, how do I pay tithing on capital gains? And he said, "You think this is tough?" Gail asked us the same question on the sale of the Jazz, and I thought that was really said something special about, how do I pay tithing on the sale of the Jazz? That's so, but.
We'll keep your secret safe. All right, so our next question is, well, you talked a lot about being hands-on and working hard, building relationships and giving, but what else helped you in climbing the ladder from being an independent contributor to a management position?
Wow. I'm not sure that anything different than what I said, but putting in the time, being there, being willing to take on new responsibilities. People have asked me, well, how did you stay with one company for 35 years? That's just got to get boring. But I was there at a time when we were growing, and so it was, building things at the Salt Palace, then going to the Delta Center where we had new opportunities, suites, name rights issues, and then things just kept changing, it seemed like. But it's the willingness to adapt, willingness to be able to understand, and leadership is about learning and gleaning from others. Those who are, it's my way or the highway. They may make good salespeople, but they're not. They may not make good sales managers. And so I think it's. I just tried to be inclusive and to be able to listen, and I think that raises somebody to a potential of a manager or a leader.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. How is working with the South Valley Chamber different than your positions with the Larry H. Miller Group?
It's in some ways it's the same, but meaning that you work with business people, business leaders, but it's the difference is with the Larry Miller Group, I had all kinds of resources. I mean, I had a CFO and a full accounting department. I had an HR department and a payroll department. And now we're trying to provide that for our clients. We have a staff of 4, and maybe we'll have one at 5. And so learning to be able to do some things that you don't have those resources, and we're providing those same resources for other small businesses, because we don't have an HR department, so we need to rely on some others. We don't have a payroll department, so we rely on a company to help us. And so it's more hands-on, but the other thing is some of it is the same. You have to be here, you have to show up, you have to set the example, and you have to use those relationships to be able to keep moving down the road.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned a lot of different leadership skills and things, but if you had to kind of narrow it down a bit, what would you say is the most important trait for a leader to develop, and have you seen that valuable in your career?
Wow. somebody's thought of a really good question. I would say it's integrity. If people know, if integrity and consistency, if they know what they know what they can count on and what they can plan on, and it doesn't matter if it's a rainy day or a sunny day, or if it's a good day or a bad day, that person is going to be on the spot. They're going to be honest. They're going to be hardworking, and they're going to be consistent. I don't know how to really put that into words, but if they don't know what to expect when you walk through the front door of the office that morning, that's not a good thing. But if they know that you're going to be the same person tomorrow as you were yesterday, and you're going to be forthright and honest, I learned that from Larry. Larry would do business deals, and we would say, Larry, you don't have to give them that much. And he would always say, I want to do a little bit more, because when I walk past them on the sidewalk downtown someday, I want to be able to look them in the eye.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. Thank you. Our next question is, what kept you going, and why did you choose to stick it out with the Jazz early on when times were tough? Some people would have left to go find greener pastures, but you chose to stay. Why?
I think it was fun. I like building things, and that was the fun part. It was difficult. We were in the early days of the Jazz before Larry. We were asked to hold our paycheck for a few days so that the players could cash theirs. We were tight for cash, but it was also, I probably helped the fact that it was the Utah Jazz, right? And so that had a little bit of sexy cliche to it. But building, and there just seemed to be some hope, and that the hope really came when Larry stepped in and bought both halves of the team, and that hope. And then, as I said a minute ago, the fact that we did this, and then we had to do that, and then we got to build the arena, that just kept me involved. The other thing, and I'm not the only long-term employee with the Larry Miller Group. They're just a great family to work for, and they look at things through family eyes. And during this pandemic, Gail held on to employees because she knew them. And the Sports Entertainment Group, there were no Jazz games, there were no concerts, there were no family shows, there was nothing to sell. And yet they held on to all of their sales executives and leadership. Well, that's one of the things that changed with the new owner, because he had people who weren't producing, and Jim Olson had to do a pretty major layoff right after. Gail they look at things through family eyes, and that kept you there as well. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's something that we all value in somebody, is that they'll, take us for who we are, and not like absolutely every mistake that we make or anything like that. Okay, our next question is, what was the hardest decision you ever made, and do you regret that choice? How did you deal with the fallout?
Well, I think, I won't say the hardest, I don't know. Let me, in 2003, I was promoted to Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing and Chief Marketing. I was already the Chief Marketing Officer, but there was three of us. There was the finance, the CFO, myself, and Dennis Haslam was the president. So everything PR and sales came under me instead of being divided up. It was my dream job. I had everything under my umbrella, the Jazz, except for the players, which was fine. I didn't need that. And that was in 2003. In 2004, I received a call from the church office building, and they were asking if we would go serve as mission president a year after I got my dream job. I guess that could be a tough decision for some people, but that decision was made long before that question ever came. Maybe not about that specific question, but we made a decision. We walked away from our career, and we went to Pittsburgh. I met Brad, so it already paid back. But people have asked me, because during that time, Dennis Haslam left as president, and they put in a new president. It was, Randy Rigby, who was a great associate. We worked well together. My phone blew up when we were back in Pittsburgh when they made that announcement. And I'm sure that if I had stayed, that probably could have been my job, because I had more tenure, more seniority. But that was it. I don't know. I don't regret the decision, and I think that my path that came back was even better, and being able to work in the corporate office. So that was a tough decision, but it really wasn't. It wasn't tough at the same time, because that decision was made years before the question was ever asked.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. How about, what was the most fun jazz related work that you did?
There's several fun things, but for me it was really fun to go out and to sell the suites that we had at the Delta Center, and I was selling them off of paper and artist renderings, because we didn't have a finished building. And when we got farther along, we could take people in boots and hard hats and walk through the mud and say, well, if you can visualize that mud down there, that's where the court's going to be. But Larry assigned that to me personally, and not to a sales department. He said, I want you to do this personally. And even I thought we had more inventory than we'd ever sell for our market. But we opened the Delta Center in October, and by November, we had them all sold. And that, for me, that was incredibly rewarding to be able to get that. And it was done, he didn't pay me any extra, and there was no commission. After it was completed, he called me to a special lunch that I didn't know what it was for. And he presented me with a check, but he said, you did that without ever asking for a raise or a commission or a bonus. He said, I want to acknowledge that. So for me, that was one of the great successes that I enjoyed in those early years of the Jazz.
Yeah, that sounds super fun. Thank you. Okay, for our last question, in your bio, it kind of talks about your anti-bullying stuff. What does your work in the anti-bullying arena entail? And are you seeing that get better or worse?
So I chair the Utah Anti-Bullying Coalition. We've changed our name to Stand for Kind, because we feel like it's a little bit kinder, gentler, but we still our chapter or our corporate papers are Anti-Bullying Coalition. The work they're doing is phenomenal, working with students and helping them to understand that we all have value, and that we need to accept each other. It doesn't matter what the color of our Levi's, or the fact that, in my days I had holes in Levi's. Today you have to have holes in Levi's, and try just being accepting of everybody. And they're doing really good work. And we give schools tip lines so that the kids can call and report acts of kindness. So we try to promote the positive stuff, but we also have training for administration and for parents that talks about looking for signs and to be aware. Our people created our own curriculum for bus drivers. so that they can watch for signs and things, so that we can get ahead of it and get them help. Bullying is different today than it was when I was a kid. You know, bullying was, you know, after you got the bloody nose, after you got beat up, it was over with, and picked on. But today, with what goes on cyberbullying as well as cliques, we're seeing what we call shunning as a real evil form of bullying. You know, a organized shun, where a group of young women or a group of young men get together and say, don't sit with her at lunch. Don't talk to her. Let's not talk to her. It's just horrific. And then, you know, it adds to our suicide initiatives. But we have hope because we get emails and letters saying, thank you for that training. I feel better about myself. I feel better about helping others. And so, but the problem, we have to keep going over and over, because students just keep turning over and over. But we feel like we're making a difference, and our director Pam Hayes and her team is just doing some wonderful things. And if any of you ever would like some information, somebody to come talk to your organization or your school, let me know. We'd love to.
Okay, thank you, Jay. I mean, we really appreciate your words and your positive feedback on everything, and we'll turn the time back to Rob to go over a few housekeeping things.
Yeah, Jay, thank you so much. We really appreciated you being here with us today and sharing that. So, a couple last items just as we're wrapping up. Again, I know it's been posted in the chat, but Brad and Gina have posted a link about the upcoming event on May 21st with Dr. Marilyn Gist. And then for our chapter, on May 26th, we'll also have an event. It'll be a virtual company visit with doTERRA. So for anyone that's interested in learning more about their company, possible job opportunities, or partnerships, that's a great opportunity there. And we'll be sending out additional information on that, both posted on our website and via email. In addition, as we're looking forward down the road this year, in June, we're still planning on our June family event. So we'll get you the details on that. And in October, on October 14th, we're still planning to hold our Pioneer in Leadership Award Scholarship Gala event. This year we'll be honoring Jane Clayson Johnson, and we're really excited to get back to that. And so if anyone is interested in sponsorship opportunities, please reach out to Lisa Jensen. So again, thanks to everyone for coming. We'll be wrapping up now with a benediction from Lisa Jensen.
Our kind and eternal Father in heaven, we are grateful for this beautiful day. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet together to strengthen and bless one another and to promote moral and ethical leadership among our ranks. We're grateful to Jay for taking his time to speak to us, to motivate us and give us ideas on how we can elevate our thinking and our performance at home and in the workplace. We ask for a blessing upon the leaders of nations and upon our companies and those around us, that as we make choices daily, we can make sure that those choices are in line with our beliefs and in line with the integrity that we possess. We are grateful for the BYU Management Society and for BYU and for the opportunity to be affiliated with them and for the opportunity to promote moral and ethical leadership throughout the world. Bless us, Father, now as we depart, and help our efforts to make a difference in the world. And we pray for these things humbly in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.